Hi, I'm Suzanne McAllister with Vegan Spirituality Group of Philadelphia, and I am delighted today to be interviewing Lisa Levinson, who is the founder of Vegan Spirituality Group, which started in Philadelphia, but now has spread throughout the country. Lisa continues to grow the vegan spirituality movement with online offerings, animal activist support groups, and many other activities dedicated to ethical veganism and the protection of all sentient beings, and those of us dedicated to their cause. I had the good fortune to meet Lisa sometime after moving to Philadelphia area in 2005, which coincided with my decision to become vegan. As with so many of us, finding an organized community during those early years was incredibly important. Lisa currently resides in Southern California, where she is campaigns director with In Defense of Animals, with a special interest in sustainable activism. Lisa created something called the Toad Detour when she was in Philadelphia, saving the lives of countless toads as they annually made their way across the city street. Lisa's involved in many other ventures that I hope we'll hear about during this interview. So, Lisa, thank you for being here today. So,
It's my pleasure.
thank you. I really was thrilled when you said that you would be available to do this. So I've known you for well over a decade, but I do not know your vegan journey. So I wondered if you would share with us how you became vegan.
Oh, sure. I would love to. And actually, just a little tiny story first about the toad detour. And I can
Thank you.
answer more questions about that. But I have to say, everywhere I go, I meet little toads. I mean, it's unbelievable. Toads and frogs, even hiking in the desert. I found a little toad or frog in this waterfall just popped right up, and it's just amazing. So
Well,
when
your
you
karma.
Yes, yes. I think when you do kind things for animals, they kind of show up in different ways to thank you. And so
Wow.
that's what I've experienced with at least with the toads and frogs.
Well,
So
I'll never forget that we would be at a potluck and it would be 8 o'clock at night. It would be raining and not pleasant. And Lisa would put on her rain gear and you would be off doing your detour. And then I
yes.
believe you handed it off to an organization when you left. So,
Yes, I did. The Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education adopted the toad detour when I left, which was really delightful, and they still continue doing that each year.
well,
That's nice.
thank
So,
you. And the toads, thank you. So,
oh,
um, so now maybe tell us about your journey to veganism. How did that happen?
sure. So, my journey to veganism, I always think that I know there's a popular singer who has a song, "I was born that way," but I always feel like that. I was born that way, and I've met people who've said, "Oh, I'm vegan at heart," and so probably, I was born a vegan at heart. And then as I continued learning about animals and observing them, there were little moments that I still remember, which gave me that idea that I might be a little bit different in how I
Hmm.
perceived animals. Um, like little tiny things such as I was watching this little, I think it was some kind of caterpillar on the sidewalk, and then another child went, riding by on their bicycle, and I think injured this little creature. And I was
Hmm.
so devastated. And I had been feeling as though I was making friends with this little creature.
Yeah.
So there's something like that. Like I always felt as though I was making friends with the animals. When I was a little girl, my dad liked to fish, and so we would go fishing together, and he would um, I would look at the animals, look for the fish, and I would feel as though I was playing with them and talking to them. And he would then put his hook in that area, and so we ended up having little conflicts because of this, because I wanted to make friends with the animals, and he was trying to kill them or hurt them or eat them.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an interesting little dichotomy. And as a result, my sister, she became really good at all those things that I really didn't have the stomach for.
Oh,
Um, so it was just interesting growing up thinking that I'm different. Like we went to a little fair, Del Mar Fair, huge. It's actually a huge event in Southern California, and there was this little calf there that looked very ill and you know, like
mm.
sickly. And above the calf, instead of saying calf, it said veal, a sign. And so that
Oh
just
my God.
really upset me because I knew that we had eaten veal as a child. And so I got very upset and cried. And pretty much any time we were somewhere where that was offered, I would cry. And so as a
Huh.
result, we just stopped that because it wasn't really worth it to my family
Yeah,
to go through that. So we didn't eat any more veal per se.
yeah.
Um, but they weren't super supportive. So when I was really young and I knew the word vegetarian, even as a child, somehow I remember saying I was going to be vegetarian. I kind of announced it during dinner because I would say things like, what's that? And my mom would occasionally answer like, well, it's the tongue of this kind of animal. And then I would get upset. My dad would say, please don't say that to her. And it would just cause a little rift. And so I thought I'm going to be vegetarian. So I announced that. And then my dad said something like, well, who's cooking for you? And I thought, oh, well, all these amazing vegan kids these days. They're so empowered. They have support from their parents and they learn to cook and they're fantastic. I, however, was a little intimidated by that and took
Yes.
that as a big no. So I really didn't go a vegetarian until I left home when I went to
Yeah.
college. And so at that
Wow.
time, I worked at a health food store. I learned about being vegetarian. I also, a little bit around that time, worked at an educational farm, and it was called Hidden Villa, and they had an environmental education program. So I was a biology major and very interested in natural history and animals, of course. And so I wanted to help like other children and learn about environmental education. But this was a working farm, and so they did actually have the very few. We had one cow and maybe a couple of pigs, and they did give birth to sheep and lambs, and so we watched them get born. The interns and
Mm,
I were there, and it was really exciting. And then at the end of the year, the farmer literally divided up the bodies of these animals and figured out who was going to get the leg or whatever part, and and we also had a baby calf because they did have a female cow who gave birth every year, and then the baby was Brownie this particular year that I was there. And then there was a truck that came at one day to take him away. So I was
oh,
really upset by all this. And at that point, um, yeah, I decided I was 100% vegetarian. And then I moved to Philadelphia for graduate school, which is partly how we got connected. And
okay.
in that moment when I got there, just like you said, it's so important who is around you during those early years of making that choice to be vegetarian or vegan. And so I looked around, who are the vegetarians here? And it turned out to be a group of macrobiotics. So,
Okay.
and then when you are macrobiotic and vegetarian, you just happen to be vegan. So,
Okay.
and I, believe it or not, took classes with Christina Perello, who's now like a world-class, vegan chef. And at that time, she had it was growing, but I learned from her cooking and
Mm,
so much about the different whole foods, I would say plant-based cooking. So,
yes. Wow. That is so interesting. And I don't think you are alone. I think so many children, when they make that connection that what's on their plate was, a rabbit or a chicken, or they don't want to eat it. And so your story about what it was like for you as a child, but how difficult that it caused, like you said, some friction in the family and not encouragement. And yes, thankfully, it does seem like things are changing with that regard. Although I imagine there are lots of little kids who, like you, told their parents, I'm going to be vegetarian, and it was not encouraged. But hopefully, the tide is turning. Um, so I was going to ask you if you had mentors along the way, and you've already mentioned one who I'm not familiar with her. But were there other people in your early days of transitioning to veganism who you considered mentors?
Yes, yes. And one thing about Christina Perello, she actually has a television show and
Hmm.
she teaches vegan cooking. So some people may know her and she's in the Philadelphia area. So
Okay.
that's something to maybe check out.
Well,
So
I will. Yeah.
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 And so other mentors along the way. Wow. Very interesting. It's funny because Judy Carmen, who wrote the book Peace to All Beings, I
Hmm.
would say is a mentor. We had a very interesting meeting because I had been reading her book when I had moved back to California and was putting together a vegan spirituality retreat. And there I was, in the midst of her book, and then I got this phone call from someone, and she was saying, "Oh, I'm really excited. I would like to register for your vegan spirituality retreat." And then she gave me her name, so I wrote it down. And then I looked at the book and I looked at that name and I said, "Oh
Oh
my
my
goodness, I'm
gosh.
reading your book right now."
Wow.
So
Wow.
it was really
Yes.
delightful. So
And I've
yes.
had the pleasure of meeting her at one of the retreats we had in Philadelphia before you moved. So I wondered, what was your inspiration for the vegan spirituality group? How did
Wow.
that
So
get started?
yeah, and this is also interesting too because it started right around the time that you moved to Philadelphia and joined our group. So what happened was members of our group who you know very, very well, like Cheryl, who is a
Hmm.
member, and Sandy Herman, and
Hmm.
so Cheryl um, Richmond, she said, "I really want to put together I'm interested in having a vegan church." She said, "Why isn't there a vegan church?" I remember her kind of exclaiming
Wow.
this. And I thought, that's an idea. And then she said that when she goes to church, she often feels a little disconnected because the meals aren't vegan and um, how that can feel a little uh, as if you're not welcome in that space. And so we had that idea of, okay, what if we put together a vegan church? Like, why don't we do that? Meanwhile, Sandy Herman, another um, member of our group, she had said that she was doing exploring of veganism and of spirituality and had joined lots of different groups and then kind of coined the term vegan spirituality. And I love that. I had been on a similar journey, kind of
Yes.
with different women's groups and other things, and finding out that even different groups that were spiritual weren't necessarily promoting veganism,
Hmm.
and even Buddhist groups. So it was really very interesting at the
Hmm.
time. And then so Sandy had that idea, and we decided, well, let's just start it. Let's just start this group. So we did that. We had meetings. It was really grassroots. We decided to meet once a month in somebody's home as a little potluck, and we decided as we did that to talk about vegan spirituality. What does it mean to each of us?
Hmm.
How are we defining it? We decided that we were actually co-creating this at the time.
Wow.
And so we did that, and we met and had great conversations. We brought in either books or articles or things that were of interest to us. And we also decided that we needed different kinds of rituals that
Hmm.
we would want to honor. For example, if somebody's animal companion passed, that was really significant in our lives, and we wanted to do special rituals for that. And we also decided, well, let's host a retreat. And we had no idea who would come. We really just thought we'd put it out there. And believe it or not, we had I think it was either 50 or 55 people who came to the very first one, and from all over the tri state area. And we were thrilled, and we knew that there were other people interested in this at that time.
Yes. Yes. Wow. I'm so glad to hear that. I had no idea that, it was through, I figured it was something organic like that, but to hear exactly how that happened is, I always love hearing the origin story, so to speak. So, um, how did your interest in sustainable activism get started?
So that has a lot to do with my move back to California. Because when I took that giant leap of faith back into the Golden State here without a job, that was an adventure. But when I came here, I did start up a vegan spirituality in the area. I learned about Meetup, and I actually hosted a retreat. I believe Will Tuttle was the very first speaker at
Mhm.
that retreat, and he had invited people that he knew. And Dr. Marilyn Kroplick, who is the then and still current president, she was the president of the board of IDA at the time. She had attended it. She knew Dr. Tuttle, and she joined us, and she was just thrilled and loved what we were doing there. We had, Will as a speaker. We had vegan food. We did yoga. We did mindfulness activities. I believe, even did a little walk around the property there, which was in a beautiful area of Malibu.
Mhm.
And so it was a whole day just devoted to exploring veganism as a spiritual practice. And she loved that and decided that she would like to bring that into her organization in some way. So at the time, I was near around that time, I joined in with IDA and began working there. And then she had this wonderful concept of it was combining these different practices like sacred activism with something called, well, nonviolent communication,
Mhm.
and another thing that was called trauma stewardship. So these were all concepts that were from someone else,
Mhm.
different activists, writers, and and also psychologists. But what
Yeah.
she decided to do is put it all together into one campaign with these three basic modalities or tenets. And so I joined forces with her to actually put that into reality, to create a campaign for activists to help them, because many activists were suffering from compassion fatigue, which was well known in the health field, but
Yeah.
not so well known in the animal rights field at the time. And so we decided just to go ahead and start this kind of innovative program to offer the same kind of health and wellness services to animal activists. And so we started this support line, which people can still call.
Mhm.
The number is 800-705-0425. And you can also reach us online or chat and send a text. So there's lots of ways to reach us. But
And that's
what
all through IDA. If anybody listening to this wanted to find the Sustainable Activists platform or resource.
Yes, yes, you can go to idausa.org/, you can put sustainable activism or /activist support. That will take you right to our support line. So there's different ways to reach us. We have a whole lot of resources. We actually have a page, idausa.org/resources, with listed out all of these mental, physical, spiritual books, webinars, articles that you can tap into for your own well-being.
Yes. Well, and I know that you do a lot. In fact, maybe you can say what some of the things that you are doing as the director of campaigns for IDA. I've been aware of them, but for people who have not, who are not, maybe you could talk about those.
Oh, sure. Well, In Defense of Animals is an organization that's been around for well over 30 years, and actually, our founder, Dr. Elliot Katz, just recently passed
Yeah.
away, which is very sad. But we did honor him with a virtual memorial and an incredible tribute video that showed all of the work that he's done through the years to save animals, from laboratories, from zoos, and so we're really continuing on in his stead. But the organization has many different campaigns, and some of them are to stop the dog meat trade, to stop puppy mills, to create a new form of justice for animals in the Deep South. Also, there are campaigns to help wild animals. We are trying to save Tule elk from being shot in the Point Reyes National Seashore.
Mm.
As also part of our wild animals campaign, which I helped to run, started in 2019 a national goose protection coalition. And so right now we're very involved in stopping goose roundups, which happen at this time just prior to July 4th around the country,
Mm.
where communities actually pay to have, using taxpayer dollars, to kill the geese, and then also the goslings, because the time that this is done is while they're molting. They can't fly, the babies are with them, so it's really just a brutal massacre. And we're trying to raise awareness about this nationwide, and also look at some of the financial benefits to the USDA and how this is really almost like a money-making scam. So
Wow.
we're trying to expose all of this. And so the campaigns, they actually, we work very closely with local groups and various activists across the country. We have a fur campaign to stop fur, the sales of fur in different areas. So we are, I would call it, this general animal rights organization with lots of different campaigns. So if you're curious, you can go to the website, idausa.org, and then you'll find all kinds of action alerts and also different campaigns and even more details about them.
Yeah. Well, there is no shortage of things that need to happen to protect. I mean, yes. So how do you see the state? And these are broad questions, but because you've been involved and because I see you as being both very creative and also good at actually getting things organized. You know, often people can be very good at coming up with ideas, but you not only come up with an idea, but then you make it happen, whether it was the Toad Detour, vegan spirituality. So, you know, you and Cheryl and Sandy had this idea, but then you made it happen and you've been the driving force behind it. So how do you see the state of animal advocacy and activism right now? You've been involved for 15 years. What trend lines do you see?
Well, I will first say that I have learned I am an optimist. So I, after being involved in this for many years, instead of feeling jaded and hopeless, I actually feel very
Mm,
hopeful, and I feel as though good things are always happening and that they're also right around the corner. So, and I do hear quite a lot from different activists. I work in lots of coalitions around the country, and even wildlife corridor coalitions, and I see a lot of wonderful things happening for animals. Of course, there are things going on, the cruelties that have been going on
mhm,
for decades, even millennia. But if we stop to take a look at the progress along the way, then we'll see that lots of changes have been made. And
mm,
so I feel like we are um, moving towards a precipice of
mm,
of new understanding of about animals. And each person, every activist, every person who makes a decision to be vegan or to be vegan for this meal,
mhm.
makes a difference and helps us to move closer and closer toward that ideal paradigm of living in a vegan, or especially vegan friendly world.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because one of my last questions was going to be, are you optimistic or pessimistic? And you've already answered it. And I think to do the work you do, especially with sustainable activism, you would have to, in some ways, be optimistic. Otherwise, I think it would be almost jarring that you're trying to help those who are in this work to maintain an optimistic attitude. The other thing that I don't know whether this is where you get some of that optimism, but I think when we involve ourselves with other people who are engaged in animal advocacy and we see what they're doing and we see all these efforts, it can help to make us feel like, well, no, there's a lot that's going on that's painful to know about, and yet there are all these efforts. So I'm not sure if that's how you stay optimistic.
Oh yeah, that's a huge part of the type of work I've done. For example, even vegan spirituality, part of why we started that was to offer support.
Yeah.
Supports that would be really specific for vegans. Like sometimes maybe vegetarians might not even understand some of the issues and concerns that vegans are dealing with regards to family, with regards to public messaging. So we wanted to provide really like a support group too. And so it has a celebratory element of being together, of co-creating a new paradigm, but also to support what Claire Mann, who's a vegan psychologist, says. The angst of being vegan in a not yet vegan world. And
Yeah.
she wrote this wonderful book called Vistopia, all about the challenges that many of us face. And sometimes just knowing other people are going through that too, it's almost as though, oh, here's my tribe. I found my people. And I feel as though it normalizes it for all of us, so that we know we're part of a large movement and we're not alone. And especially in this time of connecting through Zoom and the internet is such a great time to join all kinds of online events, online groups where you can talk with other vegans and animal activists and get that sense that, you know what, I'm speaking with an activist in Spain right now or in Australia, and we are all connected through our values. And that's what's so important, is that many people have had a shift of consciousness and are changing their values, so that we all have a reverence and respect for life and animal lives as well. And that's part of this, is that we're trying to uplift humanity, to have a new perspective about animals and to embrace them as part of who we hold dear and where we apply that idea of compassion.
Mhm.
So it's really a spiritual endeavor. We're trying to
Yes.
raise this, you call it energy or vibration or awareness, however you like to term it, but this is like the dawning of I guess you could think the age of Aquarius. For me, this would be the dawning of the age of Aquarius. It would be about bringing this new lightness and this new perspective that we are part of this incredible web of the natural world, and that we're not fighting against it. We're really part of this big family.
Yeah.
And I think that is, it's not us and them, it's all of us. It's the we. We're all together. And how do we maintain our world and the
Mhm.
health and wellness of our earth, who we all depend on for food, sustenance, grounding, and so many other things. So
Yeah.
I think this is a really important part of our evolution as humans. And also, one of the things that Judy Carmen, who we mentioned earlier, just wrote a book called Homo Ahimsa, which
Mhm.
talks about these qualities of compassion and how they're so important for the people that we're evolving into, the ones who we're becoming.
Yes. I mean, it's interesting listening to you talk. I think two things occurred to me. One is that you both derive sustenance knowing that you're part of this, that we are all one. And when you really know that, there's an energy flow that just goes through you, because you're not in a little capsule. The other thought that occurred to me is, a little bit like 12-step programs, there's a saying, in order to keep it, you have to give it away. And so
Mm.
being part of a spiritual movement, an ethical movement, and you're in a sense giving it away by promoting it, by encouraging, and that is a way to continue to grow it yourself. If you just hoard it, it wilts, but when you're giving it away, it grows. It's a paradox in some ways, but that's what I was thinking of as you were talking. Um, so I would just have one more question, which is, what are some of the things that you are most proud of?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Well, I, of course, am very proud of vegan spirituality and of this very special community that where it all began in Philadelphia. And I'm also very proud of another uh, I guess we call it another arm of vegan spirituality, that is our Interfaith Vegan Coalition. So since the vegan spirituality group has expanded a bit and people anywhere can start their own vegan spirituality group, we're all connected. So if anybody's curious and wants to start their own and be part of this family of groups, they can reach out to veganspirituality.com and then get connected to us that way. But for those who feel as though their spirituality is part of a traditional practice, a religion or some kind of spiritual practice and would like to bring these vegan values to their places of worship, to their faith places, and then our Interfaith Vegan Coalition joined together. We have all sorts of groups from Jewish Veg to Catholic Concern for Animals to
Mhm.
various groups around the world that have joined in. We have groups that are part of pretty much every major tradition,
Wow.
including Islam and also some pagan groups. And what we've done is put together some kits that if you happen to be the lone vegan at your place of worship, there's very likely a kit that
Mhm.
relates to it with all kinds of ideas, books and stories and prayers and poetry, images. And this would be almost like a gift for you to share with the people and give you some ideas of how can I do vegan advocacy here where I attend.
Mhm.
And so that's one idea. And also from that coalition, which includes a Buddhist groups, Dharma Voices for Animals, we also have there's a prayer for compassion. Thomas Jackson, who's the filmmaker of that production, that is one of our tools. Is this as it's like the cowspiracy for spirituality, where we
Mhm.
can share this film and it explains the journey of veganism that Thomas had and how it related to spirituality in his journey. And it does bring a lot of enlightenment and to the spiritual community. And so we have different tools that we can provide and brochures and things that really help individuals who might feel like they're the only person where they are to start a little community there and to do some advocacy within their places of worship. And we know this is important because about 80% of the world is really devoted to a religion or a spiritual practice, and we can't leave them out of our animal rights activism. They're very, very important.
Well, and it's a wonderful outreach, so that if somebody is in a community like that and feeling isolated, so in wrapping up, I want to say what you have meant to me. And when I met you, I don't know whether you remember, we met at a dance. It was like a free form dance, and I don't remember the year. It might have been 2007, somewhere around there, maybe 2008. And at the end of this dance, we all stood in a circle and said a little bit about ourselves. And I'll never forget it because you introduced yourself and you said, I'm an animal activist. And it was like, I made a beeline for you so quickly when we broke up, and you told me about vegan spirituality. And when I went to that first meeting, which was maybe a few weeks after that, I remember crying because I had been so isolated and I didn't even know where to look. And so, talk about synchronicity. And, I felt blessed and I continue to feel blessed by having met you and having been introduced to vegan spirituality and the journey that's taken me on doing what I'm doing right now. Um, but I also want to say that you're one of the people who I really admire. And I think you are creative and innovative and have endless energy, and then this organizational ability to actually make things happen. So I am so grateful to know you and so grateful for the impact you had on my life and continue
Oh,
to have on my life.
oh, wow, Suzanne, this is so meaningful to me. I have to tell you, I remember that moment too. It was like a divine spark. It was like this connection of two lost souls who found each other in that
Oh,
moment,
God.
and it was a really, really beautiful. And that's why I really encourage people, even if you feel alone, to speak your truth, to say who you are, and then you'll find other people like you. People will resonate with you and will come to they'll be attracted to who you are because you're telling them this is who I am. I'm a vegan, or I'm an animal activist, or
Yeah.
I love animals. That's who I am. And then you
You
can, mhm.
taught me a lesson that I never forgot because I thought this dance had nothing to do with animal activism, but you said that because that was an important part of you. And there are times when I feel vulnerable, but I say it even though I might get total blank stares from people like, but like you said, you never know who is in that group who might, like me that night, um, you know, have met you. If you hadn't said it, I probably would never have approached you. So anyway, good lessons. And
Definitely.
thank you so much. Thank you for everything you do. And thank you for being willing to chat with me today.
Oh, willing is not the word. It is honored. I admire and adore you just as much or maybe more than you
I don't know
you
about
do me. So
that.
it's really an honor. I completely respect who you are and
Mm,
all of the transforming that you've done, and also just your incredible background and ability to communicate
mm,
with others and as a therapist as well. So I think there's no accident that we met, and
mm.
it's such a delight to know one another and to co-create. Here we are. I mean, I'm very
Thank
excited about this project you're doing and look forward to
you.
seeing other interviews. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.